It's time to move on to the fun stuff, the miter stand. But first, a little janitorial work to do. Are you enjoying these videos? Do you get anything out of them? Would you like to see me make more? Well, this is your call to action. Drop down in the comments section down below. Give me a comment. Give me a thumbs up if you like the video. And remember to subscribe. Come on over to thesmartwoodshop.com where you can find out more about us, see some of our projects, and you can also visit my store where you can purchase any of my plans to download instantly, or you can use our Amazon affiliates where you can purchase your tools for the same price they'll give you every day, but they share a little bit with us. It's time to break down some more 12mm for both the miter table as well as the extensions. After using the track saw to break the plywood down into manageable pieces, then they were easy to run through the table saw for repetitive cuts. I have the second table saw set up with a dado blade. This is just a real shallow pass for the tape measure to fit into so that it won't be knocked off in construction. Not absolutely necessary to do, but I just like it's an extra step to just set that tape measure just below the surface. I think it'll last longer moving it around by doing so. I did set up a two-piece kind of sub fence, just a couple pieces of plywood, so that one is the blade had to be set up right next to the saw, and I didn't want to cut my fence. And then the top one holds it down. Since it's such a shallow cut, you really want to press it down to make that cut. It's pretty easy to let it float up just a little bit and then not really get the cut. So I've got it kind of pushed down tight, so I have to force it through a little bit, but I find this works really nice. Having completely reworked the design from the PTS-1, I'm checking things, even though I've worked it out on SketchUp, I want to just double check and make sure everything is working out. I have these notches there to do with having the extensions fit in and have a place to hold, and then also some under support where the top is cut away for the track to go into, and it'll have something to mount to it. I want that to run all the way up. And then also I am setting it up so that it's flush on the outside, because obviously I don't want it sticking beyond it into the bench, but I also want it a little bit shy of the saw. I don't want it super tight to get the saw in and out. So a little fine tuning here, working all the bugs out. This is also an opportunity to make some minor adjustments if you're using a different miter saw. Then the length of these sections will be slightly different for your saw. And also this is again a section that is screwed into place once I'm all done and got it made up. These will not be glued down. I'm glad these aren't glued down because as it turns out, this is my first pass and I will end up making quite a few modifications. Those modifications, obviously, like all of them, made them to the final plan. So if you pick up the plans for the Smart Total Station, aka PTS-2, it will have the stuff you'll see in the future videos, but I just want you to see how I kind of work through it, and you'll see the mods as well. After everything is worked out, I think I've got all the bugs worked out, I am going to glue together the laminations for the two sections that go on the bench that will be screwed down. Again, they will be changed quite a bit, but at this point I don't know that, so I'm getting it all glued together thinking that I am ready for prime time. So I'm working on the Paulk Total Station and I am putting together the miter extensions, and I wanted to take a quick break and show you one of the products that I'm putting in it. It's the T-Track that I got from Clampy Systems. Now, this is my favorite T-Track that I found, and I've talked about it before, but I wanted to show you this kit because when I put together the video series of assembling it, you know, this will already be in there. So I want to, you know, pull this out so you'll know what we're talking about here. So I talked to Lance at Clampy Systems and asked him to put together a Paulk Total Station Ultralight PTSU kit so that you can just click and order and get exactly the T-track and screws that you'll need to build this. And so he's put together a link, and I will be putting that link in the plans. It'll be a hot link that you can click on, and I'll also be putting it in my store under the tab. I'm going to create a tab, and I think we're going to, you know, I'll come up, the tabs are only so big, but it'll probably be PTSU or PTS2, and I'm going to try to put everything in there as far as stuff I've purchased and where I got it from, so that it'll be easy to find this stuff. And so what he's put together for me is a kit with 2 longs and 2 shorts. Now they're all exactly the same material. They're this really nice T-track, which takes a hex head bolt, and this will work really well with my dual stops that I do on each side with the hex head bolt dropping through them. And the lengths of these, I've had him make them a little bit longer than we actually need. And you'll see in the video that I cut these. I just cut them with my wood blade and my miter saw when I cut aluminum. I've done that for decades and never had an issue. But basically, once I got the side set up, I marked it and I cut it exactly where it needed to go. And I'll do the same with the longer ones. So the longer ones are also a couple of inches long. And I've also asked him to include the screws. And these screws are the ones, they'll be the right length to go through these pre-drilled holes right into the wood of both the extensions and of the main bench. So it'll be 2 shorts and 2 longs, all cut just a little bit longer than you need so you can cut them to fit. And the reason I wanted to do that was I wanted to be a little more precise, and also not everybody's using the same miter saw that I'm using. So if you're not using the Capex, your distance from where the opening is for the miter saw to where the support, the miter saw support comes in to the bed of the saw will vary from saw to saw. So you'll be cutting that to fit your saw. And so I wanted to make sure that, you know, these wouldn't be too short. So they're long enough to cover any saw. The Capex should be actually one of the smallest saws widthwise, and so it should actually require the longest pieces of the shorter track. So anyway, I wanted to point that out. There will be a link for this, and again, it's Clamp-U Systems, really nice stuff, very fairly priced. And because of breaking it up into 4 pieces, 2 shorts and 2 longs, instead of 1 long one like I was trying to do, we were getting into an 8-foot length of track, and then with the packaging and all, it goes over 8 feet, and the shipping goes up astronomically if you go over that 8 feet. So we broke them up into 4 pieces, and it'll be a one-click buy thing. Certainly you can get other T-tracks, but if you want to use the T-track that I like, you know, it'll be easy access for you. I have one side of my shop-made miter track done. The T-track is installed and cut, and I'm sort of testing it out. You can see it's glued together and screwed together to the bottom using the right length screws. It could be pinned as well, but just use the screws to suck everything down tight and keep moving rather than gluing it up and clamping it and waiting. With one side made up and all the bugs worked out, I decided to go ahead and make the other side. Watching these videos, I find it interesting that I'm actually using the miter saw mounted on the Smart Total Station, aka PTS2, to actually build the PTS2 Smart Total Station. So I'm just kind of, you know, even though the other side is made and I've got all the dimensions, I'm just double checking everything, keeping that 1/8 inch space that I like between the saw bed and the actual miter bed, mainly because, again, when I slide this thing in, I don't want it wedging, you know, if you don't slide it in perfectly straight, if it's a tight fit. So no need to have it any tighter than that. Over to the table saw, I'm using the miter gauge to make the cut. I've got the blade set up good and high. It gives me the straightest section on the blade to cut right up to my line. I've got it flipped over here so you can see that section that sticks out and comes right up next to the saw. That is what supports the track underneath, because it's cut away underneath, because that is where the wedge slides into to wedge the saw tight to the bench. On the outside edge, you can see that the underside section, what I'm working on is the bottom piece, that the top will kind of overlap everything. You can see that it is short of the end, and that is because that is where the extension, its bottom piece, extends into that space. Now I'm going to cut the top section, which is longer, and we'll overlay all of that. And if this doesn't make any sense, it will when you have the plans. This, again, is a series to go along with the plans to help explain things so you can see how everything goes together. Now I'm going to work on the extensions themselves. You can see the cutaway there. That is for the tape measure, and you can also see that the bottom piece is wider than the top piece. Rather than doing a dado for the T-track, I just simply made the top piece narrower and the lower piece wider, and the T-track will mount onto that lower piece. It'll screw down into it, and the height of the T-track matches up well with the 12mm plywood, so it will be flush with the top. So essentially it's creating a rabbet without actually cutting one, just laminating the two pieces together. Now that I have things cut to length, I'll do a little detailing, breaking the edge so that all the roundovers are done, softening so they're not square edges to be damaged. I'm laying out the screw pattern before I put on the glue, set up a little block so I'm not using the tape measure as much. And then spreading the glue, lots and lots of glue, spreading it out so that I get a good lamination between the two pieces. I want this to be a very strong, rigid extension. Then I'll jump over and clamp it down and pre-drill some holes with a little countersink on it. Moment of truth, a little test fit to see how everything is coming together. Checking out the T-track, because that has to butt up nice and flush, because the miter stop has to slide from one to the other. This is my first pass. Actually, I had quite a few other designs, but one that made it to the final stages of how I would actually clamp the extensions to. Now I'm showing you this because I had done some stuff earlier that I'll end up changing. This is not the method that I will end up using, and it's not the method that's in the Smart Total Station, aka PTS2 plans, but you'll get to see how it went together. It worked okay, but not as good as I'd like, so I ended up making a modification. But working it out here, what I did was take some metal C-channel, and I cut it to the proper length that I needed to mount it on the bench. That section gets bolted onto the bench, and then I drilled some holes in it, tapped those holes so that some bolts could then be threaded up through there and create a wedging, two bolts actually, one front and one back, that would wedge up against the extension and hold it in place. Those holes are drilled and threaded, and I've threaded the hex head bolt in, put a little nut on it first, and then put the knob on, and then tighten the nut tight to the knob so the knob doesn't spin. The knob is just a handle to spin that hex head bolt up, and once this C-channel is mounted, bolted from the underside of the bench, then you can spin those knobs up, and those bolts will then go up and push tight against the extension when it's slid in and hold it in place. If you take a close look at the top of the bench, I have used a spade bit here just to drill a somewhat flat bottom hole, and then I've dropped in a hex head bolt with a washer, and that is then from the underside bolting that C-channel up. So there is one of those in the front leading edge, and then I drop the clamp off here, and you can see that I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. I'm going to drop this bolt in, and then using a washer and a nut on the other side, I am going to suck that C-channel up really tight. So you can see the concept here. It seemed like a really good idea, but as it turned out, it didn't work out as good as I would like. So you can see with the shop-made track with the T on it, you can see that the T goes all the way up to the miter saw, or close to it, within that 1/8 of an inch. But it's set in from the end of the bench a little bit, and then if you look in the kind of lower left-hand corner, you can see the extension, the edge of it, and how that will slide in. So the T-track doesn't just flush up on the outside of the bench, it slides in a couple of inches, and that helps line things up. It's really important that I have no bumps or anything to get in my way when I'm sliding the T-track out past the fixed portion to the extension portion. I want to smoothly slide. Well, with the shop track made, both the fixed portion and the extensions, I'm going to switch gears in the next video and make the extension support. Give me a thumbs up, give me a comment, subscribe, and come on over to thesmartwoodshop.com. Thanks for taking the time to watch. Have a great